couple of housekeeping items I wanted to review with you. I believe I may have told you, and you may have forgotten, that the quizzes are open for you during the week after you finish them so that you can go back in and review and see what you missed, so that you'll be able to get a handle on the material and know the questions that you did not get correct and see what the right answers are. So I hope that you'll take advantage of that opportunity, because that will be helpful to you as you go forward. Second of all, assignment number 2 is due this week coming up. In the past, remember I said that it didn't matter so much what the right answer was as long as I knew what you were thinking. There's part of assignment 2 that you kind of need the right answer. And I have posted the Excel spreadsheets for you to use, or you can use your own, make up your own worksheet. I'm okay with that. But I have 3 worksheets in an Excel file, and one of them has to do with calculating the net operating income and some other things for the properties. So you might want to use those. Remember that assignments are posted on the left-hand side under the assignments link, and please make sure you get that in on time. I look forward to seeing how that goes for you all, and let me know again if you have any questions. I'm happy to help. Chapter 7 has to do with leases. The biggest takeaway from this chapter is that there's a big difference between residential and commercial leases. Commercial is pretty sophisticated, and a lot of times there's attorneys involved with those transactions from the beginning and all the way through. But the residential are a lot more simple, and most often you'll use the same form of a lease for every tenant, while the commercial, they tend to be more specialized and written with specific terms and conditions for different tenants depending on what's negotiated. As we have talked about in the past, if you're going to do property management for yourself or someone else, my recommendation and advice to you is to have an attorney draft your form of lease and use that same form without changing it, and until you get up to speed a little bit anyway, and then it's easy to go in and make some changes to some of the boilerplate, the pre-printed stuff. But if you get somebody to draft up something that will be legally defensible for you to use, that's in compliance with the law and the other requirements of Idaho law, then that will make it easier for you going forward. A residential lease is typically for 6 months or a year. It can be month to month. It doesn't even have to be in writing to be enforceable. Idaho law does say a contract that can't be performed within a year has to be in writing in order to be enforceable, but a 6-month lease or month to month would not have to be, and it would still be enforceable. Hard to prove, though, what was agreed on if it's not in writing. As we have often said, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. That's why it's a good idea to have a good form of written lease. You'll want to include the rules for the property and that kind of thing in the lease. And you'll also want to make sure you get all the tenants to sign off on it so that you don't have a problem later on. You'll be able to collect the rent if you need to. And in the unlikely event you have to evict someone, you'll have the names of all the occupants of the property on the lease. So you'll be able to get everyone out at once and not have to try to guess. I've seen in eviction court sometimes where one person signed the lease, but there were 2 other roommates. And when you go to eviction court, the only person that got evicted was the one who signed the lease. You had to track down who the other ones were and then go through a separate process sometimes to get them out. So it's a good idea to make sure you have all your tenants on the lease. And that means husband and wife or significant other, or if it's more than one group of friends, 2 or 3 people, have everyone sign a separate document. The other thing about a residential lease that's important is that often you'll want to run a credit check or hire a service to do that. I have posted on one of your discussion boards for this week an assignment for you to be able to find out some additional information about the people you're thinking about renting to. Idaho Supreme Court has a data repository that includes all of the court cases in the state of Idaho, So you can see if anyone's been evicted from a property in the past, or heaven forbid more than once, because I do know of a couple situations where people are serial scofflaws and they get evicted more than once. That might be a red flag for you to take a look at that and see if that's something you want to sign up for. If you know the person has a history of being evicted in the past, typically those things are for non-payment of rent, and sometimes folks do some damage to the property too on their way out the door. And the other thing you can check is the sex offender registry, and I did post that link as well. Those are things that you can do yourself that are free. It's kind of even fun to do the map search on the sex offender registry where you're living now and see who might be in your neighborhood, especially if you have kids. Everybody's entitled to have a safe place to live, and that includes the sex offenders, but you want to be aware of your surroundings. I've almost always had somebody within a block or two of my house and never had a problem, but an ounce of prevention and all that, just good to be aware. And you'll want to check references for your residential leases too. Now, the book and I do not recommend calling all the people they list as references, because usually, who are you going to put down? You're not going to put down somebody who's going to say something bad about you. If you put down your friends and they all say, oh yeah, that's a great person, yay, you're probably not going to get a lot of good information. But it is helpful if you can verify employment, and that means just checking to see that the person has a job and where they work and how long they've been working there. So you can see if they have a history of steady employment. And you can also contact past landlords to ask, would you rent to this person again? That sometimes is instructive information. If you're going to do the credit check, I encourage you to get some additional information and training on how to do that and set it up correctly, because there are requirements if you fail to rent to somebody who, because of a bad credit report, or you use that information in your decision, you're required to give the person notification of the bad credit report, and they have some things they can do to look into that you're required to notify them of. So that's a little bit beyond the scope of this class. So if that's something you're going to do, then you should probably get some additional help from an attorney or hire a service that will do it for you, because they know the rules. For commercial tenants, probably the biggest thing you'll want to check on is they're almost always businesses. So you'll want to check and see, is it a corporation or a limited liability company or an individual? You'll want to get some financial records from that business. Have they been in business for a while? Who are the people? You can run checks on the individuals that are the principals of the corporation or the LLC. You can find out some general information. And again, when you're signing a commercial lease, you'll want to make sure that you have the right parties named in the lease. A corporation is considered a person. It's a separate standalone entity, just like a limited liability company. There are different people who are authorized to sign for those business entities, and so you'll want to make sure you have the proper people on the hook so that your lease is enforceable. The other thing you might want to consider doing for a business is to ask for a personal guarantee from the principals of the company. In case the company goes belly up and they don't have any assets, that happens fairly often, and if they file bankruptcy, you get nothing. But if you have a personal guarantee from the president or the manager of the limited liability company or whatever, then you have some reasonable likelihood of perhaps recouping any money that might be owed to you. The residential leases are fairly straightforward. Typically, people pay a set amount of rent every month, and then the management takes care of all the common areas and the parking lot and snow removal, landscaping, all that. Commercial leases can be operated that way, or they can be very different. The commercial leases that are often seen around Boise area are what's called triple net or net, meaning that the tenant pays the property taxes for the property, the insurance for the property, and all of the operating expenses for the property, such as the landscaping, the snow removal, the maintenance of the building, all those kinds of things. So all the rent payment that goes to the owner is completely free and clear net of operating expenses. So that's called a triple net lease. And there are some variations of that where there might be a net lease where they pay the property taxes and the operating expenses, but not the insurance or something similar. And that is very common in commercial leases. At the Real Estate Commission, our previous office was a triple net lease. So we had to arrange for the people to come and trim the bushes and clear the snow and maintain the parking lot if there was a pothole and check out the roof and all these things. The office we're in now is a full service lease. The state negotiated a good lease for us that includes everything as part of our lease payment, even the janitorial services. So we don't pay any additional costs, utilities or nothing. It's all included in the lease. So that's called a full service lease. That is not as common in commercial, although when you're a state agency, we're pretty good tenants and we're reliable for paying our bills, so they tend to work with us a little bit more. Commercial leases are often expressed in the rate is per square foot. So for example, our lease at the Real Estate Commission is $14.50 a square foot, and that includes everything. But you might pay $13 a square foot and then be responsible for the utilities and that sort of thing. It's all negotiable. The commercial leases can just be all over the place. The other thing that is important to know about the commercial leases is that they tend to go for a much longer period of time. 3 to 5 years is not at all uncommon, and in fact we have right now a 5-year lease and an option to renew for 5 years that's coming up. So we're in the process of negotiating right now to see if we can get the landlord to throw in a couple little sweeteners for us. We'd really like to have a shower in our office because some of us would like to ride our bikes to work or go out for a trot at lunchtime, and it would be great to have a shower in our building, but I don't know if we're going to get that. We're going to ask, because if you don't ask, the answer for sure is no. But that's something that we're doing right now. And the other thing, that when you're first leasing a building to a commercial tenant, sometimes it's a shell and just the outside walls and the roof and the windows, and that's all, nothing inside. So landlords often will say that, we'll rent you this amount per square foot, and then we'll throw in $40 a square foot for tenant improvements. TIs, that's what those are called. And that means that they will build out the inside to suit what your needs are as the commercial tenant. It also means that there is an expectation that you will rent for a longer period of time to recoup that investment. And when we got into our current office, we did have to move a couple walls, not too much, but we had a little bit of interior work that had to be done. So that was part of our lease negotiation, was throwing in those tenant improvements, or TIs. The other thing that most commercial leases often have, especially when you have more than one business in a building, is what's called common area maintenance, or CAM charges. If you ever see CAM charges, that's common area maintenance, and that's for the foyer, the restrooms, the parking lot, that kind of thing. The areas that all of the tenants use, the cost to operate those and maintain those areas is typically added up and divided in a proportion based on how much square footage you have in the building, and then you pay that proportion as an additional expense on top of your lease. And it can be very complicated, as I said, and there are a lot of commercial leasing agents that have 4-year college degrees before they even go into that line of work, because it is pretty sophisticated, but it's fun because everything's different. You never know what you're going to get from one day to the next. I did post a discussion board for you this time and a quiz, but just the one item, because I really want you to focus on getting your assignments in top-notch condition and turned in, and I will look forward to chatting with you again next week. Have a good one.